Uh-oh, what's going on here? A lot of popping and all kind of stuff. My name is Scott Stanfield. This is the Modern Longevitarian. This is the Modern Longevitarian, and episode 63. Off to a rough start here today. We got a couple technical difficulties. Don't know what's happening, but I'm so excited because today we're going to get to talk about paleo bread. And for someone who has been low carb for 5 years, you couldn't buy anything like that when in the store. You had to make everything from scratch, and there was no such thing as fathead dough or using cheese in the ways that we use cheese these days in the ketogenic diet or paleo low carb space. And so I'm super excited for that. But I want to welcome everybody watching on Spirituality Gone Wild and watching on LinkedIn. And Spirituality Gone Wild is a collection of co-creators that's been founded by Debbie G, and G stands for gratitude. And she's put together this like eclectic group of co-creators. We have people like me who talk about longevity and health span and living your best life through leadership and all of those aspects. You got Steve Weber with the American Gumption Morning Show, and Serenity Sam and Saf Bucksey. So it's got a lot of things with music and people who've worked through addictions and all those type of things. And so we got a book of secrets. We're actually finishing this up this afternoon that is coming out with the top secret in life that comes from each one of the co-creators, and is really impactful. My secret is find yourself and do you. And so the modernlongevitarian.com, which you can get to at strongforlonger.com, which affords you there, is something that I actually bought this domain 9 years ago when I was 40 and I just lost 40 pounds. And I was telling myself in the middle of a workout that I'm not a vegetarian, I'm a longevitarian, and realizing there was so much more that influenced the genetic expression of my body. And so that's the thing that I'm here. That's my mission, to tell you that everything you do is information, right? How you breathe is information for your body. It can tell your body to relax and rest, or it could tell your body to fight or run away. And so same thing happens with food. Same thing happens with exercise or the lack of exercise, or supplementing exercise for the lack of movement. All of this is creating this environment for your genes to express themselves in. And that's science is called epigenetics. And so I want to tell you, you have agency. It's not the hand you were dealt by mom and dad in genetics. It's how you play your genetic hand that matters. And so I really want to let you know so find yourself and do you. And Mark Twain said this. He said, the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. And so Modern Longevitarian is my why. It is my purpose to let as many people know as possible that you do have agency over your genetic expression. And just because you may have had, like me, cancer in your family for multiple generations, or dementia or heart disease, that you can make changes now that will move that and change that and maybe bypass it, no pun intended, sidestep it and do that. And the best way to do that I know is clean food and diet. And so we're going to move right in right now to bringing in my guest today. I'm super excited for this show because we're both in Utah, and I want to welcome Johanna Dasteel to the show from the Loaf. And I'm going to show you some pictures of food that I've made with it, and my family's made with it. So welcome to the show, Johanna.
Thanks so much. Great to be here, Scott.
This is awesome. So tell us a little bit about the Loaf, what it is, and then we're going to get into your story on how you created it. And then you also have other cookies and other things that are going on. So I want to hear what you got.
Right. Well, the Loaf is the first and only organic and paleo bread company in the country. So there are a handful of other paleo bread companies, but we're the only ones doing a certified organic product. And we have 3 varieties. We're also doing cookies, a couple different varieties of those. And our chocolate chip cookies are our second bestseller, second to the sandwich bread, which you've had, Scott.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the sandwich bread was a surprise. It was in my blind spot. Didn't know it existed. I don't even look for these things because, like I said, I developed my keto, habits before there were anything like this in the store that I could tap into. Right. When I was, 5 years ago. Right. Even that was like 2016. Right. When I was going into doing keto, I'd already been intermittent fasting for 4.5 years before that. So I was an early adopter in that. Early adopter into the low carb space. I actually did the Atkins diet when I was in my 20s back in the mid 90s. So I've done low carb more than once. And I don't normally eat breakfast. I eat breakfast probably, I don't know, less than 10 times a year, right? Because I've just intermittent fast. I don't get hungry till 2 o'clock. But my family loves for like for Father's Day to make breakfast for me, right? And so this is what was on my tray for breakfast in bed, a little French toast made out of your sandwich loaf. Now it's a small loaf, you can see from that big plate, but they stacked them high, right? So, and a little butter, a little keto syrup on there. And I would tell you that I fell in love right there. I mean, I was like, this, someone who hadn't had French toast in about 4 years. That was some good stuff for sure. So
Yeah, well, that's a lot of the key to the products we're making is a lot of my customers haven't had bread in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And it's just really, really satisfying to be able to give them something that they can eat that they miss so much. And that's what when I was thinking of making this company, because I have a whole bunch of different recipes that are baking recipes that I developed for myself throughout the years. And thinking about what is the most important thing, what do people miss the most, I decided to go with the bread, because that's just a staple in the American diet, and that's what's really hard to lose when you start eating this way.
it is, right. Here's the thing, right? It's uh, you know, we're changing these habits, right? We get told when we're a kid. I remember like on the weekends, my mom would make these silver dollar pancakes for me,
Mhm.
right? And my grandmother, I'm from South Carolina, right? So biscuits were, that was a big staple, right? I mean, it's like it was an extra food group,
Yeah.
barbecue pulled pork with mustard sauce, and biscuits was another food group. And so, my mom would drop me off at my grandmother's house every morning before, from middle school until I could drive in high school. And she every morning she would slice a biscuit in half. She'd put some country crock on it. I mean, my diet was so bad, right? Put it in the toaster oven, melt the margarine, and then put some strawberry jam on it for me, right? And I would
Mm.
have that. And so these type of things, like
Mhm.
sweetbreads and things like that, were a big part of the staple of the diet. So what I've noticed is that when people, I was vegetarian and pescatarian and changed my diet years before I went keto. So I'd slayed all those dragons, really. So for me, it
Mhm.
wasn't really a tough thing to like, okay, I'm just going to take carbs out, right?
Mhm.
And so it wasn't really a difficult thing. But just what's the story behind why you developed all these recipes and then therefore the loaf and the
Sure.
cookies and those things?
Well, I had a number of different sort of subtle health problems as a teenager. Like I had migraines, sleep disorder, depression, anxiety. And my doctor, in coordination with a naturopath, took me off of gluten and dairy. And that was a pretty big step for me at the time. So I think I was like 17 years old when I did that, maybe younger, but it was all around that time. And it wasn't until around 2010, I still was getting migraines. They went away for a little while, but they came back. And migraines, I was very hypoglycemic, like terrified of being anywhere without food in my purse. Just the tunnel vision and the hanger and the loss of focus and total fatigue. Was getting adult acne again, a number of different things that seemed totally unrelated to me, but the fatigue was just the worst. So I went back to an osteopath. I had moved cities. I found a new osteopath, again, worked in coordination with a naturopath, and they said, that's what you're doing isn't good enough. The gluten and dairy, you have to come off of all grains, and we're reducing sugar, even fruit sugars. You have to come off of those too.
Mm.
And my at first, I think I went 2 weeks where I could barely stay awake. I just lost all of my energy even more. I was famished, but I was dropping weight really fast, even though I was eating constantly. And then all of a sudden, the resurgence of energy came back. My migraines were totally gone. My skin cleared up. My energy went up. No, yeah, it was just total revelation to me. But having to prepare every meal and put so much energy into meal preparation all the time, I missed convenience. And I
Mm.
was a big sandwich eater before, even gluten-free. I was just eating like a ton of gluten-free sandwiches before this. So I just started passively looking into recipes and trying things to make different baked goods, breads, and cookies and brownies and all sorts of stuff, pancakes, waffles, and just through the years, I just tinkered with recipes and developed my own. Once I had a firm grasp, it's really difficult to bake this way. That's another thing. One of the reasons I started this company is because the learning curve for baking this way is so steep. And when you need some help, you need, it would be nice to have some help, I should say, to have some already made baked goods that are good and the right nutritional content, avoiding the things you need to avoid and contain the things you need to get enough protein and fat in your diet. To have those to help you make that transition. I would have loved that when I made the transition. I would have really appreciated it and been my best customer, you know?
Right.
So that's 10 years later after going this way, there still weren't any products on the market that were edible. There were a couple things that I could buy. I tried them and spat them right out.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I have this little itch to start something on my own. So I went for it.
Well, I'm glad you did, right? And this is I've said this before, maybe not on the live show, but I think I said it on one of my previous podcasts when I was doing that. And is that I really, I've been in the restaurant business 27 years, right? And I was a director of food and beverage at Salt Lake Regional Medical Center, which you probably know where that is, the old Holy Cross Hospital down next
Right.
to the U. The U, for everybody who's not from here, is the University of Utah. And I love the creativity that we're seeing with all of these, low carb, paleo, type things. And so, but what happened is that when what you just explained was sounded like that when you took away all the other sugars, that process you went through was fat adapting. You went through keto flu, so to speak.
Yeah.
And because keto, one of the benefits is your skin clears up, right? Your skin, is different. And then you got energy back. And a lot of people don't know. So some people even think, some younger generation think that keto is this new thing, right? Well, keto's been around for a long, long time, right? Atkins, it came around, and that was a modified ketogenic diet that was higher in protein and those type of things. And then back in the 20s, they started prescribing it to children who were non-responsive to seizure medications, because the ketones actually pass the blood-brain barrier and it changes the way the brain functions and those things. That could be the reason why that your migraines went away, because you were getting some ketones in there and building some metabolic flexibility, which is actually super cool, which is one of the pillars of being a modern longevitarian. Food is fuel, and that includes fasting, feasting, clean food, which are organic, which I love, right? Because we got to get away from glyphosate, right? That's what's really causing a lot of problems with us.
Right.
And then having fiber, which is super important, and then metabolic flexibility, which is one of the things that I think is that means flexibility means is that you're like your car, you have a flex fuel, right? You can burn carbs and you can burn fat, because if you just burn carbs, it's so hard to get it to switch over to ketosis, right, and burn the fats. I'm at a loss for words now, right? So the thing about being live. Well, let's go to this.
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, organic, I find, is so important. I'm not, I haven't done the keto diet, but many of my customers are keto, so I'm familiar with it. I'm much more familiar with paleo because that's the way that I eat.
Right.
And paleo diet recommends, if you can, to eat organic. It's so important to avoid the glyphosates. And I even filter our water with a Berkey filter because it's one of the few on the market that actually removes the glyphosates and the estrogen from the water. I work in, I have a consultant, a guy I went to undergrad with, who's now a scientist at the Mayo Clinic, who advises me on how to avoid estrogenics in my products. So the filtering the water is one thing, but also the way I package the products. I don't have any plastic touching them. We have a clear wrap that's plant-based. It's made from it's PLA. It's a plant-based, looks like plastic product, and it doesn't contain any estrogen, because when plastic touches food, it leaches into the food. So we're doing everything we can to avoid anything that might alter your body chemistry in a negative way.
Right.
And so that's something really important is the avoiding the glyphosate and the estrogenics. Those are two top things with our
Right.
products.
And that's amazing. We can talk about that for
Hmm.
literally probably the next 2 hours, just that one
Yeah,
topic, right? Those two
yeah,
things.
yeah.
It's funny. I'm when I was on the search to figure out how to lose 40 pounds, I was reading a diet book a week. And
Mm,
this was, 9, 10 years ago when I was doing this. And, I'd done P90X 5 years before that, and they had the P90X diet. Organic, we were eating organic, and the reason we didn't eat meat because you couldn't get pasture raised, grass fed, organic meats. You were having to get conventional things. You could get wild caught fish,
hmm.
and that's what we really, so we were more pescatarian than we were vegetarian. But my point is that there was a couple things I really, and now looking back, I really understand the nuances between the keto and the paleo diet. And I think the original paleo diet was it was right on the edge of putting people into ketosis. And then what happened was is that um the caveman evolved and realized they needed a few more carbs, right? And then there was things that was coming out paleo for athletes. Athletes need more carbs, so then came in. And so I read about it, and then a couple years later, somebody said, "Can you coach me on? I want to do the paleo diet." And I started, reading up on the paleo diet for the modern state of it, and it, then now maple syrup was keto, I mean, paleo friendly.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, if anybody knows what it takes to make maple syrup, you take 16 gallons of sap from a maple tree. You have to boil that down to make 1 gallon of, um, of maple syrup. And so the principles of paleo was whatever you could hunt or gather, right? But now all of a sudden, the caveman in just a couple of years had invented fire, learned how to tap a maple tree, learned how to drain 16 gallons out and cook it down and make maple syrup. So it's the true paleo principles, like the ones that, like Dr. Terry Walls. I have the Walls protocol here. I don't know if you know who
Hmm.
she is or not, but
Yes.
yeah, she put her MS in remission with
Hmm.
paleo.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I realized is that the original one put people so close to ketosis, they were going through some of those, they didn't
Hmm.
fight through it or have a reason to go through it, like your migraines and all the things you were having. So they started adding carbs back.
Right.
But and so it was bouncing people off this ketosis,
Yeah.
flipping into ketosis level, and they weren't adapted enough. And so it was painful physically and figuratively and literally, painful to bounce off that keto level because they haven't built the flexibility. And so I, a lot of times, I may be eating paleo for a day or a couple days or something like that. But I also eat sweet potatoes, right? Because I want to cycle out of ketosis from time to time. So
Yeah.
those things.
Well, it's interesting. There's a range of different things you can do within the paleo diet. For instance, I for a while went on the GAPS diet to treat
Hmm.
some intestinal issues, and it was very, very effective and very, very difficult. And you're definitely in ketosis like the whole time.
Right.
I definitely had that healing crisis, and I think you called it the keto flu.
Right.
Um, it's intense and so effective. So I have a range, and I go through cycles of when I'm eating more of a keto paleo or a GAPS paleo, or like all I have cookies in my line of products that do have maple syrup, and they're also vegan. So I'll have that once in a while. But I find that I do better, moderately low carb, but I get to a point where my energy is great. But if I go too low carb, even if I go for a couple weeks, it's not coming back. So it's interesting how all of us are so different, but paleo seems to work really well for most people. Just have to find your sweet spot with it and
Right.
how it balances out. So
And
yeah.
that's my message, right? My message is that, everybody is an individual. There's no one size fits all. So if you read it, like for instance, like, I wrote a book on sleep. It's you can go find like this personal development book that says you got to get up to be successful in life. You got to get up at 5 a.m. Well, if somebody's a night owl, they much rather go to bed at 5 a.m. than get up at 5 a.m. Right. And
Yeah.
so, my wife doesn't like eating meats. And so she's very, she's, vegetarian, not vegan because, but vegetarian and occasional has some fish, where I range from, some days it's like, weeks, I'll go weeks is 100% plant based, right? A keto, 100% plant based. And then I will, then I'll have a steak, right, on a Sunday on my feast day, right? And then, I'll see I'll be in natural grocers, and they'll have, their pasture raised whole chickens on sale, and I'll bring it home and I'll roast the chicken, and we'll have chicken, and everybody will kind of snack on it, and that goes away. And then we'll go back to plant based. So we're very flexible, but we're is so unique in the fact that all of our microbiomes are such an individual place right now. And a lot of that has to do is like for instance, I was born C-section, so I didn't get the full download from mom that way. Mom did breastfeed me, so I did get some, a download of the bacteria that way, but I didn't get the full. Back in 1972, they weren't putting sponges in and coating the baby with the bacteria and those type of things like they do today, because we didn't understand it. Back then, the microbiome was considered junk DNA. They didn't know what it was, right?
Hmm.
And then, but then, like if you had a sinus infection or sick or anything like that, you got a round of antibiotics, right? My antibiotics I've taken in my life are different than what you've taken.
Hmm.
That makes us individuals. So everybody's an individual when it comes to that. So finding out what works for you diet wise is even based on what you believe, right? If you believe in, like you're going to save the planet by being vegan, right?
Yeah.
Because it takes so much water to eat to make a burger, that changes what works for you, even though physically you may actually do better eating meat or not. I don't know, but it's those type of things. So,
Hmm.
I got a couple of comments in here. Let me say hey to a couple people here. So Trevor James was asking, what's the recipe? And I think he was asking for the recipe of the French toast, right? Not your
Ooh,
bread, right?
delicious. Well,
Right.
everybody does it differently.
Right.
But
Well,
I like to do it with, I don't know. Do you know how your wife made it for you?
I'm sure I do, but go ahead. Tell me yours. I want to hear
Oh,
yours.
I like to make it with eggs and coconut milk, the
Mm,
batter with cinnamon in it too,
mm,
and just soak the bread. I leave the bread out overnight to dry
mhm.
out so that it soaks up more because it's a moist bread.
Right.
That's something interesting. A lot of paleo breads or keto breads on the market have a reputation for being tasting like cardboard or styrofoam and being really dry and
Right.
bland. Our breads are moist and rich tasting. It's just I couldn't have gone any other way. I don't want to make anything that's like a shadow of what you're used to. So
Right.
it's really delicious in its own right. But that means to make the French toast, you do need to leave it out to dry
Mm.
out. Then before you put it on the griddle, soak it in your mixture. But what did your wife do?
Well, we use Kelowna milk,
Mm,
which is sold in Whole Foods. Is actually from a Mendonite, um, a Mendonite. We use two different types of milk, right? One here in Utah, actually three, two from Utah and one Kelowna. And Kelowna is actually my daughter has a Instagram page called Kids Crazy for Healthy Cooking, and it's like over 4,000 followers on there. And she's an ambassador for Kelowna. And so we use a lot. We use their butter, and I buy their yogurt and sour cream and all that
hmm.
stuff. And they're really nice and send us some coupons from time to time. But
Cool.
we use, and then if we're Utah milk, we buy. And I'm good friends with with the people over at Redmond.
Oh,
They
I
have
love them. They
yeah,
carry my products
yeah,
too.
they do, right? And I have their
Yeah.
salt, and I'm a affiliate
Yeah.
for their real salt and all of their products. We use their bentonite clay and their toothpaste and
Hmm.
all of that stuff. And so we buy raw milk from them, right? Could with that. And
And
um
also, can I add to what's great about their milk? Because you might have people who are gluten sensitive watching this, and all my products are made in a dedicated gluten free facility too,
mhm,
which is better than just being certified gluten free. If you have celiacs or real sensitivities, those people need to make sure they're made in a dedicated gluten free facility because not
right,
all gluten free products are. But what's really interesting about the Redmond milk is I can drink that in moderation. I can't do any other milk in moderation without my
right,
stomach just blowing up. But people with gluten sensitivities are typically or tend to be sensitive to milk too, not because of lactose, which is the carbohydrate in milk, but because of the casein, which is the
mhm,
protein. And casein acts like gluten in the body, which now makes sense why you might be sensitive to the
right.
dairy if you're also sensitive to the gluten. So a lot of people who have these gluten sensitivities and dairy sensitivities, a lot of them can do this A2 milk, which all the herd of Redmond's herd are A2 cows, and it's
Oh, really?
raw. Yeah, and it's
Right.
raw milk. So it's much easier to metabolize and you're not getting that onslaught of this protein that your body can't handle. And that's the case. A lot of people who have gluten sensitivities or allergies can drink milk or even have bread when they're in Europe. The wheat is a different strain, and all their cows are A2 cows. So the A2 is the European cow, and then normal American cows are A1
Right.
strain. So
Yeah, and I've
it's
I've
interesting.
bought some A2 milk before and had no reaction to it
Right.
at all. With back when I had chronic sinus infections, if I had would have a milk, which a cup of milk has 12 carbohydrates in it with no
Hmm.
fiber. So if you're keto, you're not doing a lot of milk, right?
Right.
With it you can do dairy fats and those things, but so the third one is actually my wife found on Facebook this local farmer in southern Utah that we buy milk from him, raw honey from his farm,
Mm.
and he grows his and raises his own cattle and dry ages the meat and things like that. And so we'll get some of that and put in the freezer and have for special occasions. So we're Mediterranean in a lot of ways because that Mediterranean diet, the original one, they only had red meat 8 times a year. So even though I grew up eating red meat every day, pretty much in the South, which I don't need to, I went through the hamburger French fry line every day in high school, except when they had pizza. So you got to think that was probably what 180 days. I probably had 175 burgers, plus what I was having at home, right? So I was having
Oh my
so
goodness.
so bad. No wonder I had so many problems. And when I got out into the real world and got a little bit older and didn't move around as much, that I gained a struggle with my weight, right? Because this is such a poor diet and
Mhm.
eating white bread with you know dough conditioners in it with bromine, and so when I all those different things. And so anyway, so we get raw milk from him too, which has this really nice fat cap on it too. But I didn't know that about Redmond.
Yeah.
Their cows were
I
A2.
think they ought to start putting that on their marketing
Mhm.
materials because you
Mhm.
only know if you are chatty with them like I
Right,
am.
right.
Yeah, there's another Utah-based company, Milk and Honey, that makes yogurt, and they source all of their milk from Redmond as well,
Oh,
and they
really?
sell through the Redmond stores. Yeah, their
Right.
yogurt is great, and I avoided it for a long time because I didn't know. I knew that they were sourcing from Redmond, but I didn't know this part about
Mhm,
it being A2. And so I tried, I'm great with that yogurt. I
mhm.
typically go for coconut yogurt, but whenever I'm able to get into Redmond, I grab some of theirs
Right,
and can have like real yogurt.
right. When I'm plant based, I'll get a cashew or almond yogurt
Hmm.
from Whole Foods and
Hmm.
that. So our recipe, we don't normally put cinnamon in our recipe, so it's
Hmm.
basically eggs and a little bit of milk. We
Hmm.
we mix that up and then soak the bread in there. But that's a great tip on letting it
Hmm.
dry out. That's more like a what is it? It's like when you do a French toast casserole, kind of like pan Perdue, I think is what it's called, where you take the bread and you let it set out overnight, and then the next night you actually soak it overnight in the fridge, and you do this French toast, casserole type thing, a bake, right?
Wow.
And so you dry the bread out that way. So I mean, I can imagine, the really thick portions of your loaf, right, dried
Right.
out overnight, right, and then soak it overnight, and then you make this custard style breakfast in the morning. So
It
that would
sounds
be,
amazing.
yeah, that would be really good. And it's almost, it'd be like a bread pudding in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
right? It's what it would be. And so I often joke that breakfast is like eating dessert, right?
Oh, it
Because
is.
it's like, 'cause people need so many carbs and all that stuff.
The first
But
time I went to Italy, I was kind of thrown for a loop because they eat cookies for breakfast every day, but they say insist they're not cookies. That there's
right,
chocolate chips in them,
right,
biscuit.
right. So,
But we're no
this,
different in the U.S. Cereal is
right.
all sugar.
Right. Well, you got to think about that, right? So French toast, pancakes,
Mhm.
I mean, all of these things can, I mean, you get whatever you get from Starbucks. If you're not getting, espresso or black coffee with a little bit of milk in it, you're getting something that could be considered dessert if you look at the macros on it, right? I mean, you
Right.
just got to be careful.
Yeah.
Cindy from New Mexico, my cousin from South Carolina originally. Hello, thanks for watching the show. And I noticed we got a thumbs up from my chef friend Rich Beechner, and we worked together at Estes Park, Colorado, at the Stanley Hotel,
Mhm.
and which is where Stephen King actually wrote the outline for The Shining, and it's based
Yeah.
off his stay there, and it's haunted. I did see ghost in
Oh,
my
you did?
office. Yep,
Wow.
absolutely. Had 3 experiences with things happen. One, the phone jumped off the hook. One night I was in the restaurant by myself writing notes to the manager that was
Mhm.
opening the next day. It was 1:30 in the morning, and the phone literally jumped off the hook and landed on the paper I was writing on. And so that was one of them. And then I then when the Notre Dame, remember when Notre Dame, the church in Paris, caught on fire? Right?
Mhm.
I was having problems
Yeah.
with the internet, and I would used to go just like type in a big website that I know that would work, right? And I was and so I typed in CNN because it's really quick, right? CNN.com, boom, and it came to it, and Notre Dame was on fire. Clicked on it, and I was reading about it, and I got chills, right?
Uh-huh.
I walked away, and I was fine. I come back, and every time I would pull that up to see the update on what was happening with the fire in Paris, I'd get chills,
Oh.
right? And then the other one it was the night before Easter. It was 1:30 in the morning. There was a band playing in the room where we were going to have the buffet. And my assistant and I, Aaron, were working at laying out all the reservations for the next day. And we had really worked with the staff not to interrupt us when we were, talking to each other and reading emails and doing that type of stuff. So I could see somebody to my left, right behind her, because the door was right next to her. I could see somebody over there to the left, and she was working away, sitting down, and she felt something behind her, and she said, "Okay, who's behind me?" Just to acknowledge him when we got to a stopping point, and
Mhm.
I turned to look, and it actually just faded away, the whatever was there, and we freaked out, right? So
Rightly so.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. So it wasn't
So
just like a blue outline, like a light. It was full, like
it was
you thought it
literally
was a
like
person.
you know how like you see somebody out of the corner of your eye, right? You can
Mhm.
tell there's somebody standing there. You can feel it, and then you can kind of see just the outline of
Yeah.
somebody. You don't know who it is.
Mhm.
That's what I saw. I was standing up at my desk, right? I had a stand-up desk. She was sitting to my left, to about 3 feet away from me, and it was literally like right behind her, right in
Mhm.
front of the door. And right, if you went straight out our door through where the touchscreen computers were, through there was a stairwell that went straight up to the second floor where the room is that all that stuff goes down, right?
Mhm.
Where Stephen King slept, 237, the whole thing, right? So it's like really close to there.
Wow.
And so yeah, it was pretty
Creepy.
wicked. And we had a on-site, medium, and she said if you ever are having problems in the restaurant or things are going wrong or you see a spirit, they like tobacco and whiskey, and I don't smoke, right? I've never smoked, but we had 1,100 whiskeys and on the bar, and I went to the bar manager. Was like, I need a shot of whiskey, and she's like, "What? It's 1:30 in the morning," and I'm like, "I need a shot of whiskey," and I'm like, "I probably look like I just seen a ghost, right?" So, um, she's like, "What kind?" And I was like, "Uh, Bear Creek. We just bought it in, right? A rye
Uh-huh.
whiskey from Colorado,
Yeah.
right?" And she gave it to me, and I went into my office and put it up on the top shelf,
Mhm.
right there, and just to like do what Madame Vera had said, right? So
Mhm.
it was really a funny story, right?
Wow, what an exciting place to work.
Yeah. I did the ghost tour with my son later on after that,
Mhm.
and there's a tunnel under there, and and it was pretty exciting, place to
Mhm.
work for sure, right? To have
Wow.
all that story, and that's where they filmed some parts of Dumb and Dumber,
Mhm.
bar scenes in Dumb and Dumber were actually the bar that I had been
Oh,
remodeled.
really?
Yeah, where I worked, and so there was had remember it had the newspaper, and he's like, "Oh, really?" Right, the newspaper scene in there. We looked on the wall, that's still there, so people are always coming in and taking pictures of,
Uh-huh.
being in front of there and stuff.
Okay,
So it was a really
cool.
fun place to work. But and Rich and I had a really good time, and his wife and my wife was would come and visit and stuff. So it was really fun, for sure.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. All right, back to paleo
Oh,
and
yeah.
bread and all that stuff, right? So I hope everybody enjoyed our little segue into the Stanley Hotel and the fact that it's haunted and all those things. But
Mhm.
um, it's really interesting the relationship between foods, and when we look at that, because I actually haven't heard that piece about how casein acts as gluten in the body. And
Yeah.
when I was director of food and beverage at the hospital, and this was dating back about 8-9 years ago now, is I'd learned about celiac disease and those things. And someone who's actually been creating food and doing customer service in the food and beverage industry over multiple different venues, I've seen the rise in gluten free over the
Mhm.
years, right? Where it was never a topic 27 years ago. It was never a topic 20 years ago. And all of a sudden it became like, oh, we have one person who's gluten intolerant or gluten sensitive, to where it turned into, is like on a buffet, you had to have gluten free options and list things that are gluten free because people are so sensitive,
Right.
right? And even when my kids were in elementary school, there was a, this is a different subject, but a separate table for kids who are allergic to peanut butter,
Goodness,
right?
yeah.
And so, which never
Yeah.
happened when I was in school, right?
I
Or
know.
never seen those things. And so it's an amazing thing that where we're going. And so let's talk about your entrepreneurial spirit, right? And
Mhm.
you said you want to do something on your own. You had these recipes, you know, is it, you said that the reason that you did this because you couldn't find anything in the store really that's there. So,
Yeah.
right.
But
So,
yeah, there was a gap in the market, and there still is. I mean, I've only filled the niche in a very limited way in the Rocky Mountain region with Whole Foods, and I ship nationwide too. But there's still this gap that I'm trying to race to fill nationwide. That's what I'm working on right now.
mhm,
Um, yeah, but entrepreneurial spirit, I didn't even, a lot of the jobs that I had prior to starting this company were very self-starting and self-managing, independent roles. And so, and it didn't even occur to me until like at least a year into the business when one of my family members mentioned it. But my dad was an entrepreneur, and they said, "Oh, it makes sense that you would want to be one too." I was like,
mhm,
"Oh, didn't even think of that." But I I wanted to have freedom in whatever I was doing to do what I know needed to be done,
mhm,
and I wanted to have more control over my life, I suppose. Um, that's not the way it actually works out necessarily. Like my business controls me for the most part, but
mhm.
I'm working toward the goal.
Okay.
But I had been praying for passion about anything for years. I
Mhm,
had it in youth and in college, and then I became very, very jaded with
mhm,
everything, jobs, career, the world in general. um, and I finally, it seems kind of arbitrary looking back, but I developed this passion for starting this business.
mhm,
I kind of thought, oh, it'd be interesting to start a business, but the passion developed for this business. And I didn't even know where to start with it. I thought, oh, I can't do anything until I register the business, but who knows how to register a business? You must have to like go to school to understand these things. And so that
right.
was a hurdle that I just sort of procrastinated on, working on other things, but afraid to even try to put the legal things in place. And I still had a job at the time, just seeing if I could start things on the side. And then I started realizing as I conquered that mental hurdle, um, it's nothing that should not get in the way of anybody. And there's so many mentors and programs out there for anybody. If you even have curiosity about what would it be like to start a business, you can pay $20 for a score course on the weekend,
Right.
and totally worth it. Even if you're not committed, if you're just sort of like curious about it, go. It's total. I mean, this is COVID times. I don't know how anybody's dreaming about starting a business right now, but it's still worth learning about these things. I think so that you understand commerce and the economy and supply chain and everything. So you understand what businesses like mine are going through right now with COVID, why it's such a strain on
Right.
our businesses, what's happening in the world. So
Right. Some of us
yeah,
have no choice. Like me, I was furloughed in March, and I'm like, what am I going to do? And the restaurant industry's been decimated,
yeah,
and I was, you look at what's happening to salaries because of supply and demand. And before it was the other
hmm
way. Before COVID, there was so many open jobs, and unemployment was so low. People were, companies were willing to pay for more money for people. Now there's been about a 20% cut in salaries.
hmm
And so go get another job. You're going to take a 20% salary cut. In general, what I'm seeing, talking to, I had
hmm
Mitch Barron on the show. He's a recruiter with Goodwin, and great show. He does impressions. It was like I was James Lipton at Inside Actor Studio talking to people. It was
yeah,
super, super fun. And we've had multiple conversations since then. And that's one of the trends he's seeing in there. And We're talking about those things, and and then my friend Sean Boucher, who has the Business Chef podcast, who put that on pause, was for the first time in his career, out of a job, and he and his wife put all the chips on the table and started in Albuquerque ABQ burrito, and is getting like rave reviews. I just saw a post yesterday where they've got their first inquiries about franchising the
Wow.
that and just opened like a month ago, maybe. I think they just opened. So they had to remodel the whole thing and find the right thing. And he's building this business, he's like, we're closed on Sundays. They do breakfast burritos. He's doing it his way, has tater tots in it,
Mm.
so really, really cool stuff. And so some of us don't really have a choice. You just like opening a restaurant, in COVID is like one of the gutsiest things ever. But when your
I
back's
can't
against
even
the wall and
imagine.
got to provide for your family and those things has
Yeah.
been amazing. And when we look at food supply, you talked about supply chain and things like that.
Hmm.
I didn't know that 50% of the food supply came through restaurants, right? That's why we were deemed, like a necessity. You had to stay open because so many people buy food from restaurants versus actually going to the grocery store and buying those things.
Hmm.
So it's been an interesting, in understanding how these things work. And
Right.
so let's show you this one. You've seen this. This was on the one more thing that I made because I didn't eat all of the whole loaf the first day, right? So I had to
Hmm.
figure something else to do. And you talk about sandwiches. Now, my
Hmm.
wife and I joked that before I was keto, that the Sandwich King Food Network show should have been mine. I ate sandwiches every every meal was a sandwich, right? And yeah, I
Hmm.
think because I could eat it on the go, I could hold it and all these different things. And I love egg sandwiches. So
Yes.
here, this is the during cooking portion of it, and then after. So I basically put a little butter in there, grill the bread, and that's that local cheese that we have from that local farmer. We get
Hmm.
cheese from him too. We have chickens in our backyard, so that's one of our little mini chickens. So your loaf is smaller, so I had a little small egg to go on there.
Hmm.
And then I put a little pepper on there, and I
Yeah.
had an egg sandwich, and it was actually what
Delicious.
I ended up doing with this. I ended up cooking another egg and having it like eggs Benedict is what I did. Um,
Yeah.
versus, so even though I took that picture, I cooked another egg, flipped the bread over, and had two eggs, on top of the bread, and had the yolk. It was like my
Hmm.
hollandaise, and did
Hmm.
that.
Yum.
It was really good. Yeah, it was
So,
amazing.
so people know what they're seeing with that bread. That's our half loaf. That's small. It's like a mini loaf,
Hmm.
and that's what Whole Foods carries. But we also have a normal size full loaf of bread
Wow.
as well. But I just find that it's a high value, high cost product, and for a lot of people who've been burned by other paleo or gluten-free products, just sort of taking advantage of people's desperation to find food that they can eat and not delivering on taste or quality.
Hmm.
I make this half loaf, so it's less of an investment, less of a risk
Hmm.
than getting the full loaf of bread. So I found that that's really, really worked well for us to have that, entry product, low risk product for
I like that.
people.
You got an
Yeah.
entry level bread loaf, right? That's
Exactly.
right, right. No, but it's it's like when you look at the ingredients on there and the fact that you're organic, right? It's
Hmm.
like, Whole Foods has to make a buck on it. You're making a buck on it, right? And those things. And for me, the way I look at it is, real food is organic food, right? That's the way it should have been raised, or local, food and from the farmer's market or from somebody like Farmer Lee Jones or somebody like
Hmm.
that, is real food. And that's what it costs, right? I don't look at it that organic food is more expensive than conventional food, because conventional food is actually like death by a thousand razor cuts. I mean, you're poisoning yourself
Yeah,
slowly, right, with those things. And so
it's true.
I'm so I'm so thrilled that you even like, filter the water to get the glyphosate out and those things. And your plastic is not plastic with
Hmm.
BPA and
Hmm.
estrogen. And most people don't realize
Yeah.
that men have estrogen too. But if that gets too much estrogen, it dominates the testosterone and
Yeah.
those type of
And
things.
it's in the water. It's in your city water.
Mm,
Loads of it is. So
right,
it's really important to filter that out.
right. So where can people find you online, Johanna?
You can find me, you can see it on the screen, theloafgrainfree.com. You can visit us on social media on both Facebook and Instagram. We're at the Loaf Grain Free as
Okay.
well. Yeah.
And you sell all the products online. People just like go on right now and just order
Yep.
what you got.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely.
Shipping nationwide, right?
That's right. Yeah. Unfortunately, we can't ship out of the country because customs slows everything down, and these are all very perishable. So.
Right. Well, I don't think that people in Europe need it because they, like you said, the wheat's different, the dairy's different, all those things, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah,
kind of,
but I have a lot of requests from Canada.
do you really?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can imagine, right? I can imagine they probably have very similar issues to what we
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
with those things.
Yeah.
So, what if you could give people one piece of advice on what they could do to extend their health span? What would that one piece of advice be?
Oh, invest the time and money in your diet. I think we just touched on this is pay for your health now so you don't have to pay for it later.
Mm-hmm.
That's so important.
Mm-hmm. So, of your recipes you have on your website, which product's your favorite?
The Irish soda bread. That's my favorite one.
All right, I'm gonna have to buy some so I can try it. Right.
Yeah.
I haven't had a lot of that over my time. I didn't grow up eating that, that type of food, but I've had it on occasion a couple times in my entire life and career. Just never has come across my plate, so to speak. Right. It
Yeah.
hasn't been on the menu or any of those things. And when we go out to eat, because I'm around where I've been around so much American food and that we would go eat sushi mostly, that,
Mm.
as an adult, since I've started eating sushi, I don't know, 22 years old. This is kind of like, like my day off. If we're going to go eat, let's go have something different than what I've seen all week. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. So, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and you've educated me, which is the whole part of the process. And hopefully, we've exposed you and the loaf grain free to a lot of people. And we're planting that seed, no pun intended, so people can that grain free seed, and people can pick up the product. So I just want to say thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Scott. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's great. We're going to wrap it up right here. And so, everybody, thanks for coming on the show and attending and paying attention and sending in the comments. And we can go over more recipes if you're looking for that. And so, Johanna has been an amazing guest and really educated me in a lot of ways. So, I'm going to wrap it up right here and look forward to the Untamed Club and the Spirituality Gone Wild Book of Secrets. Again, my name is Scott Stanfield. I am the modern longevitarian. It is time to roll credits. And if today is your Friday, hope you have a great weekend. Cheers.